Jack Miller sat alone at the weathered patio table of Harborview's only seaside restaurant, methodically cutting his grilled fish as waves crashed rhythmically against the shore below. The 62-year-old retired Marine barely noticed when a thin, mud-spattered German shepherd emerged from beneath the wooden deck, its amber eyes fixed on the plate with calculated desperation. 6 months had passed since Jack lost Sarah and Emma to the fire that consumed both his family and his will to live. 6 months of empty conversations and solitary meals that blurred together like watercolors in rain. But on this ordinary Tuesday evening, as Jack watched the starving dog cautiously steal a piece of salmon from his plate and disappear into the gathering dusk, something compelled him to follow. And what he discovered behind the abandoned boathouse made his blood run cold. The German shepherd wasn't eating the food himself, but delivering it to an injured female shepherd and a one-eared yellow tabby cat huddled together on a threadbare blanket, all three living on borrowed time in the shadow of a property scheduled for demolition in less than 10 days. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Harborview, Maine, had always been defined by its relationship with the sea, nestled between rocky cliffs and deep harbor waters. The town of 800 residents relied on fishing, tourism, and the changing tides that shaped their daily rhythms. For most locals, it remained a haven of predictable seasons and generations of shared history. For Jack Miller, it had become a place to disappear. At 58, Jack carried himself with the rigid posture of his 27 years in the Marine Corps. Though his broad shoulders now slumped under the weight of grief, his weathered face, lined by decades of sun and service, rarely showed emotion since the fire. The small cottage he'd purchased on the outskirts of town, intended as a retirement haven for himself, Sarah, and their occasional visits from Emma, stood as a half-empty monument to plans destroyed. Neighbors had stopped extending invitations after months of polite rejections. The only person Jack maintained regular contact with was Frank Thompson, the town's 62-year-old veterinarian who had served as a medic in Vietnam. Their friendship consisted mainly of fishing trips where words were optional and silence understood. Frank had been the first responder when Jack's house caught fire while he was at the hardware store, a 6-minute absence that altered everything. In the months since, Jack's routine had become a shield against feeling morning runs along the shore, maintenance work on his cottage, solitary dinners at Carter's Seafood when he couldn't bear the silence of home. He existed rather than lived, moving through days with mechanical precision. Sheriff Robert Wilson, a 50-year-old former Army Ranger who had returned to his hometown to serve as law enforcement, kept a concerned eye on Jack. "Grief either breaks a man or rebuilds him," he'd told Frank. "Still waiting to see which way Miller goes." Vincent Malone's arrival in Harborview 3 years earlier had changed the town's landscape. The 45-year-old developer had purchased significant waterfront properties, promising economic revitalization while demolishing historic structures. His latest acquisition, the abandoned Hemingway Boatworks property, was scheduled for transformation into luxury condominiums, erasing another piece of the town's working history in favor of seasonal residences for wealthy out-of-staters. None of this had mattered to Jack until he followed the German shepherd into the gathering darkness, toward the condemned building that had unexpectedly become home to 3 desperate souls. The evening had started like any other in Jack's colorless existence. Carter's Seafood was moderately busy with the usual mix of locals and early summer tourists. Jack had taken his regular corner table on the weathered deck, positioned to watch the ocean while minimizing conversation with other patrons. Waitress Donna Matthews had stopped trying to engage him in small talk months ago. simply delivering his standard order of grilled haddock, steamed vegetables, and black coffee with silent efficiency. The first sign of anything unusual was a flash of movement beneath the deck. Jack noticed it peripherally, a shadow shifting against shadows. Years of military training had hardened his awareness of surroundings, even as grief had dulled his interest in them. When the German Shepherd emerged from between the weathered support posts, Jack's first instinct was to alert management about a stray. Instead, he found himself watching with unexpected focus. The dog moved with tactical precision, belly low to the wooden planks, eyes constantly scanning. Its ribs showed prominently beneath a dull coat. Yet there was dignity in its careful movements. This wasn't some mangy junkyard dog, but an animal with training and intelligence. Jack recognized the calculated approach of someone accustomed to operating in hostile territory. "You've had military training?" Jack murmured, setting down his fork. As if hearing him, the dog froze, amber eyes locking onto Jack's. For a moment, they assessed each other across the deck. Then, with deliberate care, the shepherd continued its approach to Jack's table. It didn't beg or whine, simply positioned itself at the optimal angle to reach Jack's plate. The behavior reminded Jack of reconnaissance missions: identify objective, minimize visibility, execute with precision. Donna approached with a coffee pot. "Want me to chase it away?" "No," Jack replied, surprising himself. "It's fine." When Donna retreated, Jack deliberately shifted his plate slightly closer to the edge. The dog waited, watching Jack's hands, body tensed for retreat. Only when Jack leaned back and averted his eyes did the animal make its move. With surgical precision, it took a large piece of fish, making no sound as it backed away and disappeared beneath the deck. Something about the encounter pierced Jack's fog of indifference. Instead of returning to his meal, he found himself watching the space where the dog had vanished. 5 minutes later, it reappeared, approaching with the same cautious method. This time, Jack was certain the dog hadn't eaten the fish. It was collecting food for something else. When the shepherd secured a second piece and retreated, Jack left a $20 bill under his coffee cup and followed. He maintained distance, tracking the animal as it navigated behind the restaurant, across a gravel parking lot, and toward the abandoned Hemingway Boatworks property that stretched along the northern edge of the harbor. Signs warning no trespassing and scheduled for demolition marked the chain-link fence surrounding the property. The dog slipped through a gap where the fence had been pried away from a support post. Jack hesitated only briefly before following, ducking through the opening and staying low as he tracked the shepherd across the debris-strewn yard. The main building, a large, listing structure with broken windows and weathered siding, loomed against the darkening sky. The dog bypassed it, heading instead for a smaller outbuilding that had once served as storage for smaller boats and equipment. Jack approached cautiously, hearing the first low rumble of warning growls from inside. What he saw through the building's broken window made his chest tighten in the corner. On a nest made from old boat coverings and tarp lay a female German shepherd, her swollen belly evidence of advanced pregnancy. Beside her, a yellow tabby cat with a ragged left ear stood at attention. The male shepherd gently placed the fish before them, then positioned himself protectively between his family and the window where Jack stood watching. 10 days. The demolition notice gave a date just 10 days away. These animals had found temporary sanctuary in a place marked for destruction. And something in Jack, something he thought had died with Sarah and Emma, responded to their desperate situation. Jack returned to the boathouse property before dawn the next morning, carrying a paper bag containing leftover roast chicken from his refrigerator. He'd spent a restless night. Images of the three animals infiltrating the nightmares that typically featured flames consuming his family home. For the first time in months, he'd awakened with purpose rather than the dull obligation to continue existing. The gap in the fence remained undisturbed. As Jack squeezed through, the security light on the main building flickered erratically, casting uneven shadows across the yard. He moved carefully through the debris, approaching the small outbuilding with deliberate steps. 20 feet from the door, a low growl stopped him. The male shepherd emerged from behind a stack of rotting pallets, hackles raised, eyes reflecting the dim light. "Just bringing breakfast," Jack said quietly, keeping his movements slow as he crouched down and opened the paper bag. He removed the container of chicken and placed it on the ground, then retreated 15 feet. The dog remained motionless, assessing the situation with military precision. Jack recognized the calculated gaze he'd seen it in the eyes of men who'd survived behind enemy lines. After 5 tense minutes, the shepherd approached the container, sniffed it thoroughly, then carefully took it in his mouth and disappeared into the outbuilding. Jack waited, listening to faint sounds from within, subtle movements, quiet whimpers from the pregnant female. He didn't attempt to approach closer. Today was about establishing trust, not forcing contact. "I'll be back," he promised to the empty doorway, then made his exit through the fence. Later that morning, Jack walked into Coastal Veterinary Clinic where Frank Thompson was examining a beagle with an ear infection. "Need to talk," Jack said, the unfamiliar urgency in his voice causing Frank to look up sharply. "Exam room 2 is empty. Give me 5 minutes." When Frank joined him, Jack showed the photos he'd taken with his phone, distant shots of the male shepherd, the pregnant female, and the tabby cat in their makeshift home. "They're living in the old Hemingway boathouse. The male's been stealing food from Carter's." Jack's voice held more animation than Frank had heard in months. "Female looks close to term. The demolition notice says 10 days. Frank studied the images, zooming in on details. "Male's got military training written all over him, posture. Alertness. See this?" He pointed to a barely visible marking on the shepherd's neck. "Could be a tattoo or tag buried in that fur. Service dogs get those. Figured as much from how he moves. Reminded me of a scout." Frank's eyes shifted from the phone to Jack's face. "And you're showing me this because need to help them before Malone's wrecking crew comes through. Sheriff Wilson would tell you to call animal control. They'd come pick them up and separate them, put them in cages. You know what happens to pregnant strays and feral cats in county facilities?" Frank leaned against the examination table, evaluating his friend. "You're actually invested in this. That's new. They're survivors," Jack said simply. "Deserve better than getting bulldozed. I've got to ask, why not just call animal control the practical solution?" "Since when were you practical?" Jack challenged. "You spent 3 months hand-feeding that one-winged eagle everyone said to euthanize." A smile cracked Frank's serious expression. "Fair point. What's your plan? Don't have one yet? Need to earn their trust first? Need supplies?" Frank opened a cabinet and began gathering items: flea treatments, basic medications, prenatal vitamins for dogs. "I'm making a house call tomorrow morning near there. Could drop by. Check on the female if you can get her to trust you enough." As Jack turned to leave with the supplies, Frank added, "You should know Sheriff's been keeping closer tabs on Malone's properties. Apparently, there have been reports of trespassing, suspicious activities. Might not just be your four-legged friends in there. Jack nodded, filing the information away. I'll be careful. That afternoon, Jack visited the county records office. The elderly clerk recognized him. Everyone in Harborview knew about the retired Marine who'd lost his family, and seemed pleased to see him engaged in any activity beyond his usual solitary routine. The property records confirmed what Jack already knew. Vincent Malone had purchased the Hemingway property 8 months earlier through his development company, Harborview Estates, LLC. The demolition permits had been expedited through the system with remarkable speed. What caught Jack's attention was a recent amendment. The demolition date had been moved up from the original timeline with a note citing structural safety concerns requiring immediate action. As Jack was leaving the records office, his phone rang, an unusual occurrence given his limited social connections. The screen showed Sheriff Wilson's name. "Miller," he answered. "Jack, Robert Wilson here. Just got word you were asking about the Hemingway property." Jack's military instincts kicked in. Information traveled fast in small towns, but this was unusually quick. "Just curious about the development plans." "Funny coincidence," Wilson replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Vincent Malone called me not 20 minutes ago, concerned about trespassers on that same property. Mentioned he's increased security due to vandalism. Wanted me to keep an eye out." "Appreciate the heads up," Jack said. "Not a warning, Jack. Just a friendly notice between veterans. That place isn't safe, structurally compromised. Be a shame if someone got hurt there." The call ended, leaving Jack with the distinct impression that the sheriff was delivering a message with multiple layers. The timing wasn't coincidental. Someone had reported his interest in the property directly to Malone, who had responded immediately. That evening, returning to the boathouse with proper dog food and water, Jack discovered the gap in the fence had been repaired. A new security camera had been installed on a pole overlooking the yard. Something more than luxury condominiums was at stake in the rapid demolition of the Hemingway property. And now, the clock was ticking for both Jack and the animals he'd unexpectedly committed to saving. The repaired fence presented Jack's first real obstacle. He circled the perimeter of the Hemingway property in the fading twilight, staying within the shadows of neighboring buildings. The new security camera had a blinking red light, its lens sweeping across the main yard in regular intervals. Jack noted its pattern: 7 seconds left to right, pause, 7 seconds right to left, pause. Military training never quite left a man. On the harbor side of the property, partially obscured by overgrown shrubs, Jack discovered an old loading dock extending into the water. The wooden walkway had rotted in sections, but appeared navigable. More importantly, it lay outside the camera's field of vision and connected to the boathouse from the rear. Jack returned to his truck. Retrieving the supplies Frank had provided, along with the dog food and collapsible water dishes he'd purchased, 20 minutes later, he eased his way along the decrepit dock, testing each step before committing his weight. The incoming tide lapped at the pilings below, providing cover noise for his approach. When he reached the boathouse's water entrance, a large sliding door once used to move boats in and out for storage, he found it secured with a rusted chain and padlock. However, years of neglect had caused the wood around the hasp to rot. With controlled pressure from a pocket knife, Jack created enough space to slip inside. The interior smelled of mildew, salt, and animals. Jack clicked on his flashlight, keeping the beam pointed downward. A warning growl emanated from the corner where he'd previously seen the animals. The male shepherd stood protectively, outlined in the dim light filtering through broken windows. "Just me," Jack said softly. Brought some proper food this time. He set down his supplies and backed away, sitting on an overturned bucket. For 15 minutes, neither man nor dog moved. Finally, the shepherd approached, conducting a thorough inspection of the offerings. Jack remained still, allowing the animal to circle him, sniffing his boots, pants, hands. After completing his assessment, the dog returned to the corner, nudging his companions. To Jack's surprise, the tabby cat emerged first, approaching with calculated indifference. It inspected the food, then turned its amber eyes to Jack, assessing. The pregnant female remained in their nest of tarps, watching cautiously. Jack opened the bag of dog food, pouring some into each bowl, then added water to another. "Name's Jack," he said conversationally, as if the animals might understand. "Figure you all need names, too." The male shepherd returned, maintaining eye contact with Jack while beginning to eat. The cat joined, and eventually, the female carefully made her way to the food, her movements hampered by her advanced pregnancy. "You're a military dog," Jack said to the male. "Carry yourself like one. Think I'll call you Duke." He glanced at the female. "She looks like she belongs in the moonlight. Luna seems right." The cat, washing its face between bites, earned the name Rusty for its golden-orange tabby coloring. As the animals ate, Jack took the opportunity to better examine their shelter. The boathouse had weathered decades of coastal storms, but showed signs of recent activity beyond the animals' habitation. In the back corner, partially covered with a tarp, sat several wooden crates with foreign markings. Jack recognized the type. Similar containers had transported weapons during his deployments. His inspection was interrupted by Luna's soft whine. She had returned to her nest and appeared uncomfortable, shifting positions repeatedly. Duke immediately went to her side, while Rusty positioned himself as sentry, eyes fixed on Jack. "Need to check her," Jack explained uselessly to the animals. "Frank said she might need help." He approached slowly, hands open. Duke growled but didn't move to intercept. Jack knelt beside the nest, noting Luna's labored breathing and the way she licked repeatedly at her swollen abdomen. Carefully, he placed a hand on her side, feeling the puppies moving within. The veterinary prenatal vitamins Frank had provided might help, but Luna clearly needed professional care before delivering. "Tomorrow," Jack promised. "I'll bring Frank tomorrow." The following morning, Jack awoke from his first nightmare-free sleep in months. The dream of flames had been replaced by images of puppies, of Duke standing guard, of purpose. He checked his phone to find a text from Frank confirming their meeting at the boathouse at 10 a.m. While preparing coffee, Jack found himself thinking about Sarah. Not about her death, but about her life, how she'd rescued countless injured wildlife over their years together, creating makeshift rehabilitation spaces in their various military housing assignments. "You'd approve of this mission," he told her photograph on the kitchen shelf. The words didn't catch in his throat as they usually did. Jack arrived at the meeting point a half-hour early, watching the boathouse through binoculars from his truck parked at a public fishing access point. 2 security guards in black uniforms made regular perimeter checks at 30-minute intervals. Between patrols, the property appeared deserted. At precisely 10 a.m., Frank's veterinary van pulled into the lot. Jack walked over, climbing into the passenger seat. "Situation's changed," Jack explained, describing the increased security. "We'll need to use the water approach," Frank nodded. driving to a small public boat ramp a quarter-mile down the shore. He opened the van's rear doors, revealing a small inflatable boat. "Figured we might need options," he explained. "Used to use this for wildlife rescues on the islands." 20 minutes later, they were approaching the boathouse from the water, staying close to shore to avoid attention from harbor traffic. Jack guided them to the loading dock, securing the boat underneath where it wouldn't be visible from land. Inside, they found Duke waiting alertly. The shepherd recognized Jack, but growled at Frank until Jack made a calming gesture. "Friend," he said firmly. Duke backed away, allowing them passage, but watching Frank's every move. Luna's condition had deteriorated overnight. She lay panting in the nest, eyes glazed with discomfort. Frank conducted a gentle examination while Jack kept Duke occupied. "She's got at least 6 puppies in there," Frank reported, "and she's showing early labor signs. My guess is 24 to 48 hours at most. She needs proper medical care. Jack, a warm, clean environment, monitoring. Can't take her to your clinic without questions," Jack pointed out. "No," Frank agreed. "But we can bring supplies here. I'll return this afternoon with what we need." As Frank continued his examination, Jack inspected the mysterious crates more thoroughly. Prying one open with his pocket knife revealed packing material but no contents. However, residual oil stains and a distinct smell confirmed his suspicions. These had indeed contained weapons components. The shipping labels included dates from just 2 weeks earlier. "Frank," Jack called quietly, "this place isn't just being demolished for condos. Someone's using it for arms trafficking." Frank joined him, examining the evidence. Could explain Malone's rush to demolish and the increased security. "What are you thinking? Remember Michael Davis?" Jack asked. Frank's expression sobered. Michael Davis, a local boy who'd served with Jack in their final deployment, had died 3 years earlier in an operation gone wrong, reportedly due to faulty intelligence about an arms dealer. What about him? He specialized in working with military dogs, trained them to detect weapons, explosives. Jack looked meaningfully at Duke, who sat watching them with intelligent eyes. "This dog has military training, the timing fits, and these crates—" "You think there's a connection between Michael's death and what's happening here?" Frank asked skeptically. "Don't know yet, but something's not right." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles outside. Through a crack in the boathouse wall, Jack spotted 2 black SUVs pulling into the yard. 4 men emerged, including Vincent Malone himself, dressed incongruously in an expensive suit despite the industrial surroundings. "We need to go," Jack whispered. "Now." They gathered the essential supplies, promising the animals they would return. As they slipped out the waterside door, Jack heard Malone's voice drifting through the broken windows. "The demo's been moved up to Monday. I don't care about the permits. Make it happen. This place needs to be gone. Monday, just 5 days away. Not 10. The timeline had shrunk dramatically. That evening, Jack sat at his kitchen table with photographs spread before him. Old military photos showing Michael Davis with his working dog. A German shepherd named Commander. Jack studied the dog's markings, comparing them to the photos he'd taken of Duke. The resemblance was striking, particularly a distinctive pattern on the right flank. His phone rang Sheriff Wilson again. "Jack, we need to talk," the sheriff said without preamble. In person, not on the phone. Meet me at the station in an hour. The sheriff's office was quiet when Jack arrived. Wilson led him to a private room in the back, checking that the door was securely closed before speaking. Vincent Malone filed a formal complaint today. Says you've been trespassing on his property, harassing his security personnel. Wilson's expression remained neutral. He's pushing for charges. And you called me in to arrest me? Jack asked. I called you in to warn you, Wilson corrected. Malone's got the mayor and half the council in his pocket with promises of tax revenue from those condos. But something about this situation doesn't sit right with me. The sheriff placed a file on the table. 3 complaints in the past month about unusual nighttime activity at the Hemingway property. Lights, vehicles, unloading, nothing illegal on the surface private property. Owner can do what he wants. But then this came across my desk. He opened the file to reveal a Coast Guard report. Unidentified vessel approached the harbor without proper lighting 2 weeks ago, refused radio contact, then disappeared from radar. Same night, my deputy noted unusual activity at Hemingway during his patrol. Weapons, Jack said. I found shipping crates there, military grade, based on the markings. Wilson's expression hardened. That's a serious allegation. Jack, without evidence, I'll get you evidence, Jack promised. But I need time, and I need those animals safe. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. You've been walking around half dead for months. Miller, now suddenly you're investigating arms trafficking and rescuing animals. What changed? Jack had no simple answer. How could he explain that a dog stealing his dinner had somehow reawakened something he thought had died with his family? Sometimes, he finally said, you just need a mission worth showing up for. Wilson nodded slowly. You've got until Monday before I have to respond officially to Malone's complaint. Whatever you're doing, whatever you find, be damn sure it's solid. He's got powerful friends. As Jack stood to leave, Wilson added, and Jack, good to see you back among the living. The weekend forecast called for an early summer storm system to hit the Maine coast, unusual timing that local fishermen attributed to changing weather patterns. Jack viewed the approaching weather with a tactical eye as he stood on his porch Saturday morning, watching dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The storm would complicate rescue efforts, but might also provide cover from Malone's security teams. In his living room, Jack had created an impromptu command center, a town map marked with observation points around the Hemingway property, photos of Duke, Luna, and Rusty pinned beside images of shipping crates, a printout of Michael Davis's military service record, and the official report of his death during an operation targeting arms dealers in Eastern Europe. The connections were circumstantial but compelling. Frank arrived with supplies loaded in plastic totes, veterinary equipment, a portable whelping box, medications, and emergency puppy formula. If she goes into labor, we need to be prepared for anything, he explained, demonstrating how to clear a newborn puppy's airways if needed. Jack's cell phone rang. Rebecca Chen, a reporter for the Harborview Gazette, whom Jack had cautiously contacted the previous evening. Mr. Miller, I've been looking into Vincent Malone, as you suggested. Her voice carried controlled excitement. His development company is mostly legitimate, but I found subsidiaries with interesting shipping connections. One of them, Atlantic Resource Management, leases cargo space on vessels that have been flagged for suspicious activities. Can you document this? Already have. Rebecca confirmed. Also, the expedited demolition permit for the Hemingway property approved without the standard environmental impact study. The Historical Preservation Committee's objections were mysteriously withdrawn. "Need you to look into one more thing," Jack said. "Michael Davis, Marine Corps, died 3 years ago. Any local news coverage beyond the standard obituary?" "I remember that story," Rebecca said. "Local hero, died in action. I'll check our archives." As Jack ended the call, Frank studied the wall of information. "You're building a case against Malone." "Building something," Jack confirmed. "Not sure what yet." The afternoon brought the storm's first winds, bending trees along the coastal road as Jack and Frank prepared for their evening mission. They had constructed a simple transportation crate for Luna, gathered essential supplies, and plotted the safest route to extract the animals. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Sheriff Wilson. "Am moving equipment to property now. Demo prep starting tonight ahead of storm. Proceed with caution." The timeline had compressed again. They had hours, not days. Darkness fell early under the storm clouds. Rain lashed against the windshield as Jack and Frank parked half a mile from the Hemingway property. Both men wore dark rain gear, their faces partially obscured by hoods. They divided the supplies between 2 backpacks and a duffel bag. "Once we have the animals," Jack said, "we'll move them to your clinic's back entrance. You'll need deniability can say someone left them outside during the storm." Frank nodded grimly. "Luna's in no condition to travel far. If she's in active labor, we may need to deliver those puppies on site." They approached via the water route again, the storm providing perfect cover. Lightning periodically illuminated the harbor in stark white flashes, followed by rumbling thunder that masked their movements. The inflatable boat struggled against the choppy waves, but Jack's experienced handling kept them on course. As they neared the boathouse, Jack detected unusual activity. Work lights had been set up around the main building, and a small bulldozer sat parked near the entrance. 2 security guards huddled under an overhang, smoking cigarettes and occasionally scanning the perimeter. "They're starting demolition prep tonight," Jack whispered. "Using the storm as cover, same as us." They secured the boat beneath the rotting dock and entered the boathouse through the water entrance. Inside, the animals were agitated. Duke paced nervously between Luna and the door, while Rusty perched on a ledge, eyes wide in the darkness. Luna lay in her nest, panting heavily, clearly in distress. "She's in labor," Frank confirmed after a quick examination. "First stage, no puppies presenting yet, but it's definitely started." "Can we move her?" Jack asked. Frank shook his head. "Too risky in this condition. Moving her could stress her further and complicate the birth." A new problem. Jack assessed their options rapidly. "We need to secure this location temporarily, buy ourselves a few hours for her to deliver." While Frank prepared a more comfortable whelping area using the supplies they'd brought, Jack conducted a perimeter check. Through the boathouse wall, he could see the demolition preparations advancing. Workers were placing marking flags despite the rain, indicating where explosives would be positioned to bring down the main structure. Jack's inspection of the boathouse interior revealed something unexpected, a trapdoor in the floor, partially covered by old canvas. When lifted, it revealed a small storage area containing more shipping crates. These weren't empty. Using his pocket knife, Jack carefully opened one to find it packed with disassembled rifle components. "Frank," he called softly. "Got the evidence." He quickly photographed the contents with his phone, then sent the images to both Sheriff Wilson and Rebecca Chen with a brief text, Hemingway Boathouse, weapons trafficking, need immediate assistance. A crash of thunder coincided with the sound of the boathouse's main door being unlocked. Jack and Frank froze. Duke's hackles raised, a low growl in his throat. Jack motioned Frank to stay with Luna and slipped into the shadows near the entrance. Two men entered, security personnel in black rain gear, flashlights sweeping the interior. "Boss wants one final check before they start prepping this building too," one said. "Should be empty." Jack remained motionless as their lights swept past his position. Then Disaster One beam caught Rusty's reflective eyes on the ledge above. "What the hell? There's a cat in here." The lights converged on Rusty, then tracked down to where Luna lay with Frank crouched beside her. Duke launched forward with a protective snarl. "Hey, we've got intruders!" The guard reached for his weapon, not a standard security guard's equipment, but a military-grade pistol. Jack moved without hesitation, years of combat training taking over. He tackled the armed guard from behind, driving him face first into the wooden floor. The man's partner turned, but Duke was faster, leaping to catch the man's arm in his jaws. The guard screamed, dropping his flashlight. "Stay down," Jack commanded, securing the first guard with a zip tie from his pocket. The second guard, bleeding from Duke's bite, back toward the door. "You have no idea what you're involved in," the man spat. "Malone will bury you." "Already tried that with my friend Michael Davis," Jack replied coldly. "Tell Malone the sheriff is on his way with a warrant. Those weapons you're shipping, found them." The guard's expression shifted to alarm. He turned and ran, slamming the door behind him. Jack quickly secured the entrance by wedging a piece of broken timber against it. "We've got minutes before they come back with reinforcements," he told Frank, who had shielded Luna during the confrontation, as if understanding the urgency. Luna whimpered and began straining. "First puppy's coming," Frank announced. "We're committed now, can't move her." Jack positioned himself by the door with the guard's dropped pistol, preparing for defense while Frank delivered Luna's first puppy. Duke stationed himself protectively beside Luna, occasionally licking her face in encouragement. Even Rusty participated, settling against Luna's back as if offering comfort. The first puppy emerged a tiny, wet bundle that Frank quickly cleaned and placed at Luna's side. Then a second and a third. Outside, voices and approaching flashlights indicated Malone's team was returning in force. Jack checked his phone. No response from Sheriff Wilson yet. The storm might be interfering with reception. They were on their own. "How many more?" Jack asked tensely as Luna delivered a fourth puppy. "Hard to say. At least 2. Maybe more," Frank replied, not looking up from his work. "She's doing well, considering the circumstances." A loud crash against the door indicated their barricade wouldn't hold long. Jack assessed their options. The water entrance remained viable, but would require leaving Luna mid-delivery unacceptable. Fighting against superior numbers was suicide. They needed a diversion. The trap door with the weapons gave him an idea. Jack retrieved a flare from their emergency kit, then returned to the trap door. If Malone was using illegal weapons, the last thing he'd want was attention drawn to them. "When I give the signal, be ready to move Luna and the puppies to the water entrance," Jack instructed Frank. "Duke and Rusty will follow you. I'll create a diversion, then join you." Frank nodded, continuing his work as Luna delivered a 5th puppy. Outside, the pounding on the door intensified. Jack waited until he heard Malone's distinctive voice ordering his men to break down the door. Then he struck the flare, tossed it into the weapons cache, and slammed the trapdoor shut. "Fire in the hole!" he shouted toward the door. "Weapons stockpile ignited!" The pounding immediately ceased, replaced by frantic voices and retreating footsteps. No one wanted to be near illegal weapons when they caught fire. Now, Jack helped Frank gather Luna and her newborns into the emergency transport basket they'd prepared. 5 tiny puppies nestled against their mother, who looked exhausted but determined. Duke followed protectively, while Rusty led the way as if scouting ahead. They reached the water entrance just as the main door splintered open. Jack secured the rear exit behind them and helped maneuver the precious cargo onto their boat. The storm still raged, but the short journey across the harbor seemed their only option. As Frank stabilized Luna in the boat, Jack glanced back at the boathouse. Through the broken windows, he could see flashlights and panicked movement as Malone's men discovered the flare, which had been carefully placed to create smoke, but not actually ignite the weapons. The diversion had bought them critical minutes. They pushed away from the dock into the churning harbor waters. Jack navigated while Frank monitored Luna, who appeared to be pausing between deliveries. Duke stood at the bow, somehow maintaining balance despite the rocking boat, while Rusty huddled protectively beside the puppies. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the harbor in stark relief. In that flash, Jack spotted another boat approaching, larger, more powerful, cutting directly toward them. Malone had water resources as well. "Hold on," Jack called, turning their small craft toward the rougher waters near the harbor rocks. Dangerous navigation that required intimate knowledge of local waters, knowledge Jack possessed from countless fishing trips. The pursuing boat hesitated, then continued the chase more cautiously. Another lightning flash revealed the shore drawing nearer, but not the public dock Jack had aimed for. The storm had pushed them off course toward the rocky section of coastline near Jack's cottage. The pursuing boat was gaining ground. "We'll have to beach," Jack shouted over the storm. "My place is just up the cliff path." Frank nodded grimly, bracing himself as Jack aimed their craft toward a small, protected cove. The impact as they hit the shoreline jarred everyone. Water splashed over the sides, but the animals remained secure in their protective basket. As they scrambled to unload onto the rocky beach, Luna suddenly stiffened. "Another puppy coming," Frank announced. "Right now." Jack glanced back at the pursuing boat, now visible as a dark shape against the turbulent waters. 3 minutes, maybe 4 before Malone's men reached them. "She can't climb that path," Frank said, nodding toward the steep trail up the cliffside to Jack's cottage. Jack made a split-second decision. "My boathouse there." He pointed to a small structure nestled against the cliff face, barely visible in the darkness. "Previous owner used it for storing fishing gear. It's basic but dry." They carried Luna's basket along the narrow shore to the weathered boathouse. Jack forced the padlock with a rock and ushered everyone inside. The space was tight but clean, used primarily for Jack's kayak and fishing equipment. Frank immediately set to work helping Luna with her 6th puppy, while Jack secured the door and positioned himself at the single window, watching for pursuers. Duke stood beside him, alert and ready, while Rusty settled protectively around the newborn puppies. Through the rain-streaked window, Jack saw figures with flashlights moving along the beach. Malone's men had landed and were searching. It would be minutes before they discovered the boathouse. Jack placed a hand on Duke's head. "Ready to protect your family?" "Boy." Duke looked up at him with steady eyes that seemed to hold complete understanding. Outside, the storm reached its peak intensity as Malone's men drew closer to their shelter. Inside, A sixth puppy took its first breath as Luna delivered it into a world of danger and uncertainty. The pounding on the boathouse door began 3 minutes after Luna delivered her sixth puppy. Frank worked with focused intensity, clearing the newborn's airways while Jack positioned himself between the door and the animals. Duke stood rigid at Jack's side, hackles raised, a continuous low growl emanating from deep in his chest. "Miller, we know you're in there." Vincent Malone's voice carried through the wooden door, somehow audible above the storm. "You've stolen property from my development site. I have armed security with me, and we're authorized to use necessary force to recover what's mine." Jack remained silent, cataloging their limited options. The boathouse had only one entrance. The small window overlooking the cove was too narrow for escape. His phone showed no signal. The storm had knocked out reception. Behind him, Luna was straining again. A seventh puppy was coming. "Last chance. Miller, open the door, surrender the animals and the items you took from my property, and we can resolve this without involving authorities." The irony of Malone's concern about authorities while smuggling weapons wasn't lost on Jack. He reached for the flare gun stored with his emergency boating equipment, his only weapon besides the security guard's pistol with its limited ammunition. A tremendous crash shook the door as something heavy impacted it. The aged wood splintered but held. A second blow would likely breach their shelter. "Frank," Jack said quietly, "take this." He passed the pistol to his friend. "If they get through, protect Luna and the puppies. I'm going to try something." Before Frank could protest, Jack unlatched the window and squeezed his upper body through the opening. Rain lashed his face as he aimed the flare gun not at Malone's men, but high into the sky above the harbor. The red projectile arced through the darkness, briefly illuminating the scene below 4 men in black rain gear. Malone in an expensive coat, all armed, positioned around the boathouse door. The flare cast its crimson glow across the harbor toward town, a universal distress signal that any mariner would recognize. Jack pulled himself back inside just as the door frame began to splinter under renewed assault. "What's the plan?" Frank asked, cradling the newest puppy while Luna licked its tiny form. "Create witnesses," Jack replied. "Malone won't risk exposure." The door gave way with a crash. 2 security guards pushed through, weapons raised, sweeping the small space. They froze at the tableau before them, Frank kneeling beside Luna and her 7 puppies. Duke positioned protectively, Jack standing with empty hands raised. "What is this?" Malone demanded, stepping into the doorway. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene, clearly expecting weapons crates, not a dog delivering puppies. "Where are the items you took from my property?" "You mean the illegal weapons components?" Jack kept his voice calm. "Those images are already with Sheriff Wilson, and that flare will bring Harbor Patrol. You're about to have a lot of explaining to do." "Malone?" Uncertainty flickered across Malone's face, quickly replaced by cold calculation. "No one's coming in this storm. And it's your word against mine about what was in that boathouse." His gaze hardened. "These are dangerous, feral animals that were trespassing on private property scheduled for demolition. My men were authorized to remove them by killing them," Frank challenged, still focused on the puppies. "By whatever means necessary," Malone replied coldly. "Now hand over those animals. They're coming with us." Jack stepped forward. "They're not going anywhere." One guard raised his weapon higher. "Sir, we should leave. That flare will be dismissed as a storm anomaly." Malone cut him off. "Take the dogs. kill the cat if it interferes. And Mr. Miller here has unfortunately had another tragedy. Slipped on these wet rocks while foolishly boating in a storm." The threat hung in the air, emphasized by the guard aiming directly at Jack's chest. Duke's growl deepened, his muscles tensing for attack. The sound of an approaching boat engine cut through the storm's fury. Flashlight beams bobbed along the shoreline, accompanied by voices calling out. The harbor patrol had responded to the flare despite the weather. Malone's expression shifted to contained fury. "This isn't over, Miller." He motioned his men to withdraw. "The next time won't be so public." As quickly as they had entered, Malone and his team disappeared into the storm, heading away from the approaching lights. Jack secured the damaged door as best he could, then turned to find Frank staring at Luna in concern. "She's hemorrhaging," Frank said grimly. "The stress, the movement, she needs emergency care I can't provide here." Luna lay panting beside her puppies, blood pooling beneath her. Her eyes, previously so alert and protective, now seemed glazed with pain and fading awareness. "The harbor patrol can transport us to your clinic," Jack said. Frank shook his head. "We can't explain any of this without revealing our trespassing. The weapons, everything. They'll confiscate the animals while sorting it out. Luna won't survive that delay." The harsh reality settled over them. To save Luna meant risking their freedom. To protect themselves meant potentially losing her. The patrol boat's spotlight swept across the damaged boathouse. Voices called out, asking if anyone needed assistance. "What do we do?" Frank asked, applying pressure to slow Luna's bleeding. Jack made his decision. "We tell the truth." 10 minutes later, they sat in the harbor patrol boat heading for the main dock. Luna and her puppies had been carefully loaded into emergency animal transport cases the patrol officers happened to have aboard. Duke and Rusty remained with them, surprisingly compliant, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. The patrol officers had indeed called the sheriff after hearing Jack's abbreviated explanation about finding abandoned animals at the condemned property. Sheriff Wilson was waiting at the dock, his expression unreadable as the boat approached. "Miller," he said as Jack disembarked, "got your message about weapons at Hemingway. Went to check it out." His voice lowered. "Place was empty, cleaned out. Whatever was there is gone." Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Malone moved them. He was there tonight." "Convenient timing with this storm," Wilson observed. He glanced at the animals being carefully unloaded. "These the strays you mentioned?" "Yes. The female's in trouble. Needs emergency care." Wilson studied Luna's weakened form, then the protective stance of Duke beside her. His gaze lingered on Duke's partially visible military tag. "These animals are evidence in an active investigation," the sheriff announced formally. "They need to be taken into protective custody immediately." He turned to Frank. "Dr. Thompson, as county veterinarian, you're ordered to provide all necessary medical care at your facility." Frank caught on immediately. "Yes, Sheriff. I'll need my full staff called in for emergency surgery. My deputies will provide security at your clinic," Wilson added, glancing meaningfully at Jack. "All civilians should remain off-site until we sort this out." The message was clear. Wilson was providing official cover for Luna's treatment while keeping Jack away from Malone's potential retaliation. Duke and Rusty would stay with Luna under the guise of evidence. As Frank departed with the animals and police escort, Wilson gripped Jack's arm. "You're coming to the station. We need your formal statement." His voice dropped. "And you need to disappear for a while. Malone's connected, angry, and you've just disrupted something big." Jack watched the vehicles pull away with Luna fighting for her life. Duke had looked back once, eyes meeting Jack's with what seemed like understanding. "Will they be safe?" Jack asked. "Safer than you right now," Wilson replied grimly. Jack sat in the sheriff's station's interview room, hands wrapped around a lukewarm coffee cup, his rain-soaked clothes still clinging uncomfortably to his skin. 4 hours had passed since they'd been separated from the animals. No word yet from Frank about Luna's condition. Sheriff Wilson had taken Jack's formal statement, photographed the evidence on his phone, and left him alone with instructions not to leave the building. Through the room's small window, Jack could see the storm gradually subsiding, first light breaking through scattered clouds. A night of life and death, of threat and rescue, that had awakened something long dormant within him. His thoughts kept returning to Duke the dog's unflinching protection, his intelligence, his inexplicable familiarity. The door opened and Wilson entered, accompanied by a deputy carrying a plastic evidence bag. "First, the animal update," Wilson said, correctly reading Jack's most pressing concern. "Dr. Thompson performed emergency surgery on Luna. She's stabilized but critical. All 7 puppies are alive, being tube-fed until she's strong enough to nurse. Your cat's standing guard like he's been appointed security chief. And Duke," Wilson's expression shifted subtly, "that's what we need to discuss." He nodded to the deputy, who placed the evidence bag on the table and departed. Inside the bag was a filthy, partially damaged dog tag and what appeared to be a small metal cylinder. "Found these when they were cleaning the male shepherd for examination," Wilson explained. Tag was embedded in matted fur around his neck. The cylinder was attached to his collar, hidden underneath. Jack opened the bag and removed the tag. Wiping away dirt with his thumb, the engraving became visible. "CDR 5593M, Handler M, Davis, USMC. "Commander," Jack whispered. "Michael's dog." "I thought you'd recognize it," Wilson said. "Now, care to explain why you didn't tell me your friend Michael Davis's military working dog, officially reported killed in action 3 years ago, is mysteriously alive and guarding a boathouse full of weapons similar to those involved in the operation where Davis died?" Jack stared at the tag, pieces falling into place. "Because I didn't know until now. Michael's last mission went bad intelligence failure about an arms dealer. Report said both he and Commander were killed in the ambush." He looked up at Wilson. "But Commander survived, somehow made it back to the States. With evidence," Wilson added, picking up the metal cylinder. "This is a military-grade data storage device, waterproof, impact-resistant, used for covert operations." He placed it on the table carefully. "Haven't accessed it yet. Wanted you here first since it involves your friend." Jack's military training surfaced. "Standard protocol, Commander was trained to return to Handler with mission data if separated. Michael must have activated return protocol before he died." His voice caught slightly on the last words. "But Michael wasn't here to receive him. So the dog adapted," Wilson concluded. "Found a female, formed a pack, survived, but kept the mission objects safe. And then Malone's development threatened their shelter." Jack's thoughts raced ahead. "The weapons in the boathouse, same type that got Michael killed. Can't be coincidence." Wilson nodded grimly. "Rebecca Chen's been digging into Malone's background. His development company is mostly legitimate, but she found connections to overseas entities that match patterns used by arms dealers. He tapped the cylinder. This could be the missing link, Michael's final intelligence about the operation. Malone recognized Commander, Jack realized. That's why he was so desperate to find the dogs, to demolish the property immediately. Commander is a witness, and that data could expose his entire operation. Wilson's phone buzzed. He checked the message, his expression darkening. Judge Carlton just denied my request for a warrant to search Malone's other properties based on your evidence. Insufficient probable cause, he says. He looked meaningfully at Jack. Carlton's wife sits on the board of Malone's development company. Jack understood immediately. Systems compromised. Parts of it, Wilson agreed. Which is why I'm breaking protocol. He pushed the cylinder toward Jack. You're still listed in Marine Corps records as Michael's emergency contact. That makes you the rightful recipient of his effects, including mission-related items his service animal was carrying. Jack carefully took the cylinder. What about your career? Giving me evidence. Not evidence yet, Wilson corrected. Just returning personal property. What you do with it is your business. He stood. I'm taking you to see your animals now. Then you're officially released with a warning about trespassing. What happens after that? He left the sentence unfinished. The veterinary clinic was quiet when they arrived. The early morning staff not yet on duty. Frank met them at the back entrance, surgical scrub still stained with blood. She's holding on, he reported immediately. Lost a lot of blood, but the transfusion helped. Next 12 hours are critical. He led them to an isolation room where Luna lay on a padded bed, an IV line in her foreleg, monitoring equipment beeping steadily beside her. The 7 puppies were in a heated enclosure nearby, tiny bodies huddled together for comfort. Rusty sat atop the incubator, amber eyes tracking their entrance. And Duke Commander stood immediately at attention when Jack entered, his posture unmistakably military despite his rough appearance. He wouldn't leave her side during prep, Frank explained. But once she was in surgery, he stationed himself at the door like a sentry. Haven't seen anything like it. Jack approached slowly, the dog tag in his open palm. Commander, he said quietly. The shepherd's ears pricked forward at the name. He approached Jack cautiously, sniffing the tag. Something changed in his demeanor, a recognition, a shift in attention. He looked up at Jack with focused intensity. Michael sent you home, Jack said, his voice thick. And you've been carrying out your mission all this time. He knelt to the dog's level, allowing Commander to investigate him thoroughly. The shepherd sniffed his hands, his clothes, his face, then issued a soft whine and pressed his head against Jack's chest. He remembers you, Frank observed. He remembers Michael's scent on me, Jack corrected. We served together for years. Commander knows I was part of the unit. Sheriff Wilson watched the interaction with contained emotion. What's your next move, Jack? Jack looked from Commander to Luna, to the vulnerable puppies and vigilant Rusty. First, make sure they're safe. Then, he patted the pocket containing the data cylinder. Complete Commander's mission. For Michael. Wilson nodded. I'll have a deputy stationed outside until further notice protection for the animals. Of course. Of course. Jack agreed, understanding the subtext. Wilson was providing official protection that would also shield Jack while he examined the cylinder's contents. Frank showed them to his office where a computer was available. I need to check Luna's vitals. Take whatever time you need. Alone with Wilson, Jack carefully opened the cylinder, revealing a standard military USB drive. His hands trembled slightly as he plugged it into the computer. The drive contained multiple encrypted files, mission reports, surveillance photos, audio recordings. The final file was a video dated 3 days before Michael's death. Jack clicked to play it. Michael Davis's face filled the screen, young, serious, the desert sun having darkened his complexion. "If you're watching this, Jack." Then Commander completed his mission. Michael's voice was steady, despite the implication of his words. "Something's wrong with this operation. The intel doesn't align with what we're seeing on the ground. The weapon shipments are going to a secondary location we weren't briefed on." Michael glanced off camera, then continued urgently. "I've documented discrepancies in the attached files. Our target isn't just an arms dealer, he's connected to American interests. I've identified 3 key players, including a developer named Vincent Malone who's laundering proceeds through real estate projects." Jack and Wilson exchanged shocked glances. "There's a mole in the operation, Jack. Someone feeding our movements to the targets. If anything happens to me, get this to Thomas Reynolds at Naval Intelligence, no one else. Commander is programmed to find you if I don't make extraction." Michael's expression softened momentarily. "Take care of him, Jack. He's the best of us." The video ended. Jack sat back, the weight of his friend's final message settling on him. "Michael uncovered Malone's operation 3 years ago," Jack said quietly, "before Malone even came to Harborview. And now Malone's expanded to our backyard," Wilson added, "using the development projects to cover weapons movements. Commander must have tracked me using Michael's personal effects with my scent," Jack theorized. "Found me, then found shelter nearby while assessing whether it was safe to approach. The stealing food was his way of testing you," Wilson concluded, "seeing if you were trustworthy." Jack nodded, emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Michael had died uncovering this conspiracy. Commander had survived against impossible odds to deliver the evidence. And through random chance, or perhaps something more, the dog had found his way to Jack, the one person who could complete the mission. "We need to get this to Reynolds," Jack said, reaching for the drive. Wilson placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Not yet. Malone has connections. If he gets wind that the evidence has surfaced, he'll disappear, or worse." He looked meaningfully at Jack. "We need to secure additional evidence locally first. Create a case that can't be dismissed or buried. How your judge already denied the warrant." Wilson's expression hardened. "There are other channels. Rebecca Chen's newspaper for one, federal agencies that bypass local jurisdiction for another." He stood. Decision made. "I'll make some calls. You stay with the animals. If Malone suspects what we found, they'll be his first target to silence you." As Wilson prepared to leave, the office phone rang. Frank was calling from the treatment room. "Jack, get in here." His voice was urgent but tinged with something else, wonder. "Luna's awake and responding. And, Commander, you need to see this." They hurried to the isolation room to find Luna weakly licking her puppies, which Frank had placed beside her. Commander stood protective watch, but his attention was divided between the door and one specific puppy, a tiny male with distinctive markings emerging through its still damp fur. "Look at the pattern on his back," Frank pointed. "Identical to Commander's. And this?" He gently turned the puppy to reveal a small white marking on its chest, a perfect star shape. Jack's breath caught. Michael had always commented on Commander's unique chest marking, calling it his Star of Valor. He's not just protecting any female and puppies, Jack realized. Luna is Commander's mate. These are his puppies. The revelation changed everything. Commander hadn't simply found shelter in the boathouse by chance. He had established a family, created a future, all while faithfully guarding the evidence that could bring justice for his fallen handler. In this tiny puppy, Michael's legacy would live on. The mission wasn't just about exposing Malone's operation anymore. It was about protecting the future Commander had fought so hard to create. "We'll need names for these puppies," Frank said softly. Jack gently touched the marked puppy. "This one's Michael. No question." For the first time in 6 months, Jack felt purpose flowing back into his life, a mission worthy of his friend's sacrifice, a family of survivors who needed him as much as he needed them. 3 months later, Jack stood on his cottage porch as the September sun cast long shadows across the yard. The renovated boathouse now served as a comfortable shelter for Luna and her 7 growing puppies. Though they spent most days roaming the fenced property under Commander's watchful supervision, Rusty had claimed the porch railing as his personal domain, keeping vigilant watch over his unusual family from this elevated position. The Harborview Gazette lay open on the patio table, Rebecca Chen's front-page article detailing Vincent Malone's sentencing, 20 years for weapons trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy charges. The accompanying photo showed Malone being led from the courthouse in handcuffs, his once confident expression replaced by defeated anger. Smaller headlines documented the ongoing investigations into corrupt officials who had facilitated his operations. Jack sipped his morning coffee, reflecting on the whirlwind events since that stormy night at the boathouse. The data from Commander's hidden storage device had proven invaluable, providing naval intelligence with documentation of the entire weapons network. Thomas Reynolds, Michael's contact, had arrived in Harborview within 24 hours of receiving Jack's call, bringing a team of federal agents who bypassed local jurisdiction entirely. The evidence had been irrefutable. Shipping manifests, banking records, surveillance photos, and Michael's detailed reports created a comprehensive case. Malone's properties were searched, revealing additional weapons caches and documentation. His financial empire crumbled as accounts were frozen and assets seized. "Mail's here," Frank called as he walked up the gravel driveway, waving an official-looking envelope. Since the rescue, their friendship had deepened through shared purpose and daily visits to monitor the animal's recovery. Jack descended the porch steps, Commander immediately falling into step beside him. The shepherd's transformation was remarkable. His coat now gleamed with health. His posture reflected renewed confidence and purpose. The military tag had been cleaned and properly secured to a new collar, a tangible reminder of his service and connection to Michael. "From the Marine Corps," Frank said, handing over the envelope. Jack opened it carefully. Inside was official documentation acknowledging Commander's survival and heroic return with vital intelligence, along with a formal commendation for Michael Davis, posthumously promoted for his sacrifice. A separate letter confirmed approval for Jack's proposal to establish a rehabilitation program for retired military and service dogs, with initial funding provided through a veterans support grant. "It's happening," Jack said, handing the papers to Frank. "The Second Chance Command Program is approved." Frank smiled broadly. Michael would be proud. He gestured toward the puppies tumbling over each other in play. "First graduates right there." The puppies had thrived under Luna's attentive care. Each had developed distinct personalities, Michael, the confident leader, Liberty, the independent female, Scout, the curious explorer, Valor, the protective brother, Honor, the thoughtful observer, Courage, the fearless climber, and Grace, the gentle peacemaker. Jack had named them all in the spirit of the service their father had embodied. "Sheriff's coming by later," Frank mentioned. "Says he has news about the boathouse property." The Hemingway property had remained in legal limbo since Malone's arrest, tied up in asset forfeiture proceedings. The boathouse itself had been preserved as evidence until the trial concluded. Jack nodded, watching as Luna emerged from the renovated boathouse to check on her puppies. Her recovery had been challenging, multiple surgeries to repair damage from the difficult birth and her previous injuries, but her resilience had amazed even Frank. She still limped slightly, but moved with determined energy as she supervised her growing family. Hard to believe it all started with a stolen piece of fish. Jack reflected. Frank chuckled. "Divine intervention, if you ask me. What are the odds that Commander would find his way to you, of all people?" Jack had pondered this question many times during sleepless nights. The statistical improbability of Commander locating him, the timing of his discovery just before the boathouse demolition, the convergence of circumstances that led to Malone's exposure, it strained coincidence to the breaking point. "Michael used to say Commander was the smartest dog in the Corps," Jack said. "Guess he wasn't exaggerating." Inside the cottage, the phone rang. Frank stayed with the animals while Jack went to answer it. The call was brief but significant. When he returned to the porch, his expression was complex, part satisfaction, part wistful sadness. "Naval Intelligence confirmed the final piece," he told Frank. "The fire that killed Sarah and Emma wasn't random. Malone's organization targeted me because of my connection to Michael. They knew about the evidence but couldn't locate Commander. Thought eliminating me would remove any chance of the information surfacing." Frank absorbed this with solemn understanding. "So they're responsible for everything you lost, and eventually led to taking everything they had," Jack finished. The confirmation brought closure rather than fresh pain, another piece of the puzzle finally fitting into place. Sheriff Wilson arrived an hour later, parking his cruiser beside Frank's truck. He carried a folder of documents and a more relaxed demeanor than Jack had ever seen during his tenure in Harborview. The investigation's successful conclusion had vindicated his instincts and reinforced his reputation as an incorruptible lawman. "Got the final paperwork on the Hemingway property," Wilson announced without preamble, handing Jack the folder. "Court approved the civil forfeiture. Given your role in the case and the testimony about the property's significance to Commander's mission, the federal prosecutor supported your petition." Jack opened the folder to find the deed to the Hemingway property, transferred to the newly established Second Chance Command Rehabilitation Program. The boathouse and surrounding land would become the first facility dedicated to rehabilitating and rehoming service animals. "It's official," Wilson continued. "You own the place where this all started." "Not me," Jack corrected. "Them." He gestured to Commander, Luna, and their extended family. "It's their legacy." The three men stood in companionable silence, watching the puppy's antics. Rusty had descended from his perch to supervise more closely, occasionally batting a gentle paw at an overly enthusiastic puppy who ventured too close to his personal space. "Got something else for you," Wilson said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a sealed evidence bag containing a weathered photograph. "Found this in Malone's personal safe during the final search. Thought you should have it." Jack opened the bag carefully. The photograph showed Michael Davis in desert combat uniform, kneeling beside a younger commander, both looking directly at the camera with alert, determined expressions. Jack recognized the location their forward operating base during their last deployment together. He'd taken this photo himself, just weeks before Michael's final mission. "How did Malone get this?" Jack asked, voice tight with emotion. "From your house," Wilson said quietly. "It was among items reported missing after the fire. Malone kept trophies." The realization that Malone had personally been involved in the attack on his family sent a cold shiver through Jack. The man had taken the photo as a sick memento of his victory over a potential threat. "He failed," Jack said finally, tucking the photo into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. "Michael completed his mission through Commander. Sarah and Emma can rest in peace knowing justice was served." As if understanding the significance of the moment, Commander approached, pressing against Jack's leg in a gesture of solidarity. Luna followed, with Rusty and the puppies creating a circle around the three men. This unlikely family, born of tragedy and chance, had become the foundation of Jack's rebuilt life. "The program opens next month," Jack said, gazing toward the harbor where it all began. "Michael's parents are coming for the dedication ceremony." Frank placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "From one dog stealing your dinner to a national rehabilitation program for service animals. Not bad for a man who couldn't get off his porch 6 months ago." Jack smiled a genuine expression that reached his eyes, something that had once seemed impossible in the depths of his grief. Sometimes the smallest theft can lead to the greatest recovery. In the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the family fate had constructed from fragments of broken lives, Jack Miller had found his way home. One meal, one rescue, one mission at a time. Life can take everything from us in an instant: our loved ones, our purpose, our will to go on. That's what happened to Jack Miller, a decorated Marine who lost his family and found himself merely existing, not living. But sometimes hope arrives in the most unexpected forms. For Jack, it was a hungry German shepherd stealing food not for himself, but for his vulnerable family. In that simple act of selfless protection, Jack recognized something he'd lost: purpose. We all reach points where grief seems insurmountable, where each day feels like merely going through motions. But this story reminds us that healing doesn't always come from where we expect. It might be a stray animal, a forgotten friendship, or a mission left unfinished. Jack's journey shows us that our twilight years aren't just about remembering what we've lost, but discovering new purposes that honor those memories. Whether you've experienced devastating loss, feel disconnected from your sense of purpose, or simply wonder if your most meaningful days are behind you, remember Jack and Commander. Their story teaches us that it's never too late for a second chance, and sometimes the most profound healing begins with the smallest act of compassion.